folks. How's it going? Live Q&A time. Right, welcome. Sorry this is on a Thursday as opposed to the usual Wednesday. But what are you going to do? Life gets in the way sometimes. So here we are. Thank you for joining me once again. Welcome back to all the regulars. Welcome, friends. Welcome to anyone new as well. If you haven't seen these before, this is exactly what it says on the tin. Live Q&A. So if you've got any questions for me about any pieces of gear that you might have seen in the shop, stuff that maybe you've seen me play before, or whatever it might be, maybe stuff you haven't seen me play before and you want to know my general thoughts on pieces of gear that we stock here, then fire it into the live chat and I will get through as many of your questions as I can. This is also a chance to show you some cool gear. So in the interest of trying to focus more on the Q&A side of things a little bit, because sometimes these things get swamped, so I get too much gear to show you and I miss out on your questions. So today, I've actually just got a couple of bits of gear. So, you know, that's quite simple. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about it, but I mainly want to get into your questions as much as I can. And already, I remembered my iPad today, so I can see a good few comments coming in already. So thanks everyone who's joining. McNasty, good morning from Detroit. Good morning to you, sir. Now, forgive me on the pronunciation of this one. Maxime Decoeur Guiriones. That was horrific. I apologise, but you say some elite strats, maybe. Not today, I don't think, unfortunately, but I am in the Fender custom shop room, so there may be some other Fender action happening. Steve Burrows, afternoon from the hotbed of the South Coast. I'm glad there's a hotbed somewhere, because it's been pretty miserable everywhere else in England at the moment. Rosie Penny, hello to you. Eric, I'm really hungry. I should go and make a sandwich. I suggest you treat yourself, sir. Go and make yourself a sandwich, come back. I'll still be probably getting through this introduction. Okay, Vasilis has a good question here. Hi Jack, any chance to share some of your patches within HX Effects? So, we have done a little video series before. You've probably seen it on the Peach channel, where I broke down the sort of different steps of using an HX Effects, in terms of like, you know, how to use it with your amp and using snapshots and all this stuff. So there is that, but for more of a sort of personal touch, I guess that is something I might touch on in future. Probably not here on the Peach Guitars channel. That'll be on my own channel, which I'll link below in the description. So yeah, if you want to sort of my own personal patches and things like that on the HX Effects, I'll probably talk about more of that stuff in the on that channel, on my channel. So that'll be linked below. Right. So before I get into any more questions, let's just assess the week. Well, a week and a bit, I guess. It's been just over a week now since mighty Ed Van Halen departed. Unfortunately, we lost him, and it still hurts. It still hurts a bit, to be honest with you. So I'm still sort of playing with some Van Halen mindset at the moment, which is great. I think a lot of guitar players will be, for the foreseeable, still paying tribute to what that man achieved and accomplished. And it got me thinking for today's video, rather than sort of delve into a specifically Van Halen route, I wanted to talk about something that he often gets credit for, rightly so, but that I actually think is actually more versatile and more flexible than maybe just the association with him. And I'm talking about what you'll have heard in the introduction there, the Phase 90. So I've got from MXR, I've actually got the custom shop Phase 99 on the floor, which is what you'll have heard at the start. I've never used this pedal before, but it's basically two Phase 90s in one box, which is really cool. It's got two outputs and you can separate them and have two different rates of phase running at the same time, or you can sync them up. I'm just using it with one output today, so for all intents and purposes this is a Phase 90. And I've always loved the Phase 90 because, not just because of Eddie, but also there's certainly some musicality to that effect, more so than perhaps any other guitar effect. You know, I suppose people would say maybe tremolo. You know, there's always many good causes to use different types of effects, but for me, phase and chorus are the main two for me personally. I love chorus pedals, particularly analog pedals where you can sort of get a bit of a faux Leslie speaker thing as well, but phase shifters I just think are brilliant circuits. So this one that I'm using, you'll have heard me sort of vary between a slower speed then up to a faster speed. I've got it set at about 9 o'clock, and here's what phase shifter sounds like. For anyone who doesn't know, here's what phase shifter sounds like. I'll turn off the overdrive. You know, it's a really warm sound. It's got this kind of watery quality to it. You know, I'm going to avoid using too many buzzwords here because that's what guitar players always do, to attribute certain sounds to effects. You know, watery is always one, warbly. What else? Anyway, I'm going to do away with all that. I just want to try and describe what I think it does in a musical way. To me, a Phase 90 gives a bit of life to guitar, any guitar sound. So even here on the clean, you know, for example, if I play with it on and off, you'll hear the effect that it's having. And I apologise that this is probably quite primitive to a lot of you watching. You know what a phaser is. But just in case anyone doesn't, this is why I think it's so valuable, because particularly for rhythm playing, obviously Eddie used it for his leads, but particularly rhythms, it just helps to slot the guitar into its own little pocket of the mix. Here's what I'm talking about. this one I'm using, the Phase 99, is actually quite a pronounced effect, which isn't something I always typically go for. I have got it on the vintage setting, and I think I've got it in the script mode, I think. So it's kind of as subtle as I want it to be. I just love what it does to a guitar tone, and specifically sort of not necessarily just rock stuff, cleaner, funky tones. It adds a lot of life, and it's not as obnoxious and as obvious as something like a chorus might be at times. You know, you could have it really, really slow. If I turn the speed all the way down, all right, here's what that sounds like now. Phases is that they encourage you to play less, because they sound nice for, you know, arpeggiating chords like that, but it's nice to just hear the trail by itself with the phaser sort of doing its thing without. Pretty dull. It's a great pedal, and like I said, I love modulation pedals, but there are only a select couple, I think, phasers and chorus pedals that I think can be used in a whole different array of situations. For example, I'm just going to turn the amp down a bit, because it's pretty loud in here. If I play with some gain, so, yeah, phaser, great all-round modulation pedal. I just wanted to make that point, kind of in honour of what Eddie Van Halen did with it. But I wanted to make the point that a lot more can be done with it as well. So, that's got that out of the way. Now, let me delve into some more of your questions, because I can see that the stream has been pretty busy here. So let's do it. All right. Let me jump back up to where I was. Okay. Jack Povey asks, what's your favourite Loudoun? It's quite tricky. To be totally honest with you, there have been certain Loudouns over sort of the past couple of years, maybe, that I've been doing the demos that have leapt out as being particularly good ones. But on the whole, I have to say they're just not particularly my thing. So I probably don't get the maximum benefit out of them. I would say that I do like the F body style the most, and I'm kind of more into the more traditional wood setups, so like the rosewood and Sitka spruce, which I think is is it the 32, the F32? It's just a great all-round guitar. But then at that point, you know, that's kind of not necessarily exploring the best that Loudoun has to offer with some of the more, you know, interesting and exotic tone woods that they have. But to me, as a great benchmark for just a really nice all-round fingerstyle and strumming acoustic, I think that F32, and I like the cedar top one as well, which I think is the 25. Those would be my sort of straight off the top of my head choices, but like I say, that's not really appreciating Loudoun for what they're best known for, which is the more exotic timbers. So, you know, that's just based on what I can actually remember playing and standing out to me. Of course, I played a lot of the super Koa and God, all sorts of mental wood combinations, and they all have their own thing. It's just not necessarily my personal thing. So forgive me for not giving a more detailed answer there, but you know, if you're new to Loudoun and you want to check out what the brand's about, I've always really liked, whenever I've played, like an F32, or if you want a bigger bodied guitar, the O32, which is the huge body size. But you know, there's so many different variants, and I've always tried in the demos to put across what that particular guitar is best at. You know, have a play around with it, figure out, okay, is this a fingerstyle guitar? Is this a strummer? Whatever it might be. Does this suit alternate tunings? So whatever you hear on the listening videos is kind of what I attribute probably to be that guitar's strength. So hopefully that's something to go on at least. Okay, Eric says, play a humbucking telly like the ones to your right. We might do. We'll see how we're doing as we go on, but yeah, we might do. There's some cool guitars in this room. It's actually all been revamped. Everything's been moved around, so you probably can't tell from the angle that I'm sitting at, but it's actually quite nicely fleshed out in here now. Yeah. Anyway, lest I get into the logistics of this room, there's some good stock here. I forget sometimes just how good the custom shop stock that we have is. All right. Vicilis asks, how lightweight is the new Pine Professionals from Fender? Okay, yeah, so this is the new American Professional 2, which, from what I've played, I have to say, I wasn't, for some reason, the American Professional, the first generation, never quite grabbed me. I kind of grew up as a guitar player longing for the American standard guitar, and certain other models that were around at the time. And then when they replaced it with the Professional, I don't know why, I never just had the same connection to it. Maybe it was because I started playing other types of instruments, you know, Prs and boutique alternatives and whatnot. But playing the second generation, where they've introduced, you know, new pickups, there's a new feel to the neck, there's new electronics as well. I think they've all got sort of push-pulls and coil splits and stuff like that, so they're more practical than their predecessors. Whatever it is, and you can probably tell from the video that we did, where it did an overview of various instruments from the new Professional range, they're just an absolute joy to play. Really, really great guitars, the Strats, the Tellys, the basses. I'm sure there's other instruments to come as well that I haven't tried, but they've sort of landed on the right pulse now, I think, with the American Professional 2. Now, you asked about the Pine Strat, I presume, specifically. I do like a lighter weight Fender style guitar, generally, because I think they're a little more resonant, and that Pine guitar, if memory serves, certainly had that resonance, but also, because it's lighter, it has a little bit more of an immediate attack to it, at least in my opinion. So I think it's a great all-round. Obviously, you know, that's the only colour option you've got, the Sienna Sunburst, but if anyone knows me and my personal guitar collection, I am a fan of Sienna Sunburst Strat. So there's no harm in that, no harm in what they did with the finish for the Pine guitar. Yeah, they work really well. I like the whole collection, to be honest. But if you are specifically after a lightweight Strat, then that Pine one will do you very well. Jim Walker says, what's your thoughts on the Jazzmaster? Well, quite a big topic there, but let me boil it down to this. When would this have been? I reckon 8 or 9 years ago, when I used to gig in sort of blues rock bands, my main guitar, in fact after that point as well, my main guitar was a Jazzmaster for a good couple of years, or maybe a year or so. I had a classic series, what was it called? Classic Player or something, Jazzmaster from Fender. Not a particularly expensive guitar, and I just loved it. It was a great instrument. And the more you get used to those offset instruments, you can totally make them your primary guitar. Obviously not for some styles, but yeah, I made it work for a whole bevy of different styles. I maintain that the vibrato system on a Jazzmaster is one of the best in the world. Nice, to me, in my opinion, it's nicer than a Bigsby. Just operates in a much nicer way. Stays in tune better than the majority of Bigsbys as well. Not to put Bigsbys down, but just, you asked about the Jazzmaster. That's definitely one of its merits. You know, they are bright. They are very bright sounding, but at the time I think I was using darker sounding amps. I was playing orange amps, so it worked. The contrast worked, and you can get around it electronically. You know, if you put a lower value pot in there and stuff. So yeah, I am a big fan of Jazzmasters, and sadly enough, I don't own one anymore, and I don't get to play them very often. But if I spent more time dedicated to a Jazzmaster, I think anyone out there, if you spend a lot of time with a guitar, then of course you're going to learn how to make it work for you. I think I saw on Instagram, Oz Noy, who's one of my favourite guitar players, and maybe this was circumstantial due to the pandemic, but he was posting some clips throughout these past couple of months, and I think he just had like a particular guitar. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it in the caption, but he had a guitar for the week, maybe even for the month or something. He just had one guitar. Whether that meant all his other guitars were in storage or something, but he was playing one guitar pretty much for the whole week on all the video clips. And maybe this is something that escapes me, maybe this is something that everyone does, and I just don't. But I love that idea of just, right, I'm taking you for the week, you know, and then you've got to make it work for whatever style you want to play, whatever gig you might have, whatever you're doing. I love the idea of just making a guitar work for you. And that's kind of what I did with the Jazzmaster. So, pretty unsolicited story there, but I think that's quite useful advice maybe. You know, just if you're struggling to find new sounds, just take a guitar that you don't play that much and just use it for the whole week, you know, whatever you're doing. Don't use a Strat if you're in an AC/DC tribute band or something, but you get the idea. Mustafa Hassan says, weird question, but do you find 6105 frets to be bumpy when sliding as compared to, say, a wider fret? I have to admit, I'm not a big sort of spec buff when it comes to stuff like that. I don't really notice a lot of those differences. I'm trying to even think of a guitar that I know that I've played that has 6105 frets on it. But generally, I guess what you're asking is, you know, larger frets, do they sort of get in the way if you're sliding? And the answer is no, I don't think so. After all, it's not really what you're making contact with. So it depends how heavy-handed you are. If you do play with quite a lot of force on the left hand, then you probably will notice it a little bit, but not, I wouldn't say it's going to get in your way. You know, after all, a lot of big name shredders use jumbo frets and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's just a case of your playing style, but I wouldn't say I've found that, but then I haven't done any scientific tests. But yeah, I generally, I think I like a larger fret. But once again, I just make it, you know, whatever guitar you're playing, you make it work. The Luke model from Music Man, the L3, has teeny tiny frets, and that is a joy to play that guitar. So it just depends on what you like, but also just adapting to what's comfortable on the guitar. But couldn't comment on specific fret types over any others, I'm afraid to say. Alright, the Hanson Goons says, good day, how about hearing some of that thin line telly and some 80s riffing on a Charvel? Well, you may have heard earlier on, you're not the first to ask about that telly, so it might make an appearance in a little while. No Charvels in here though today, I'm afraid, though that kind of thing might feature in the future. But I might be able to deliver on 50% of your request. Let's see how we go. Alright, Mr. ZN Smith. Intro sounded great. What amp are you playing today? So, it struck me that in these live Q&As so far, I've played Zs, I've played Magnetones, I've played Soldanos, I've played Friedmans, I've played Fender amps, and the other brand that I go on about all the time that I haven't played is Two-Rock. So I'm playing the Two-Rock Studio Signature Head with Two-Rock oversized 1x12 cab. I've had to turn it down because it was really loud earlier on. It still is pretty loud. The master is on about 8 o'clock. It's a great sounding amp. So it's 35 watts, I think, two 6L6s. And the overdrive that you heard is from the Duelist, the good old Kingtone Duelist. So that's what's going on today. Really simple, but yeah, Two-Rock Studio Signature. For some reason, just haven't used a Two-Rock before. Let's turn it up a tad from where it was actually. It's a pretty brutal amp. Like, I've got the cab facing away from me and the camera, but it's still. I'll always remember that the first day I came to work here was the day that the first shipment of Two-Rocks arrived. It's a happy coincidence, and I heard John playing through them out in the saloon, absolutely blasting, I think, a classic reverb signature, and I had to go. I think I plugged in a traditional clean, or maybe a Studio Pro or something. And if you haven't played a Two-Rock before, it's really, it is an experience because they are just so immediately responsive. It's like plugging into a hyped up Fender Twin, really, But when you really get them working, they sound amazing. But when you're playing at, slightly more forgiving volumes, it's an experience. It is an experience. Whether they're loud or quiet, whatever they are, they just sound enormous all the time. And this is only the 35 watt one. This is the baby of the range. Great sound. Okay, so I should talk about this guitar because I haven't actually introduced what the guitar is, though I'm sure a lot of you have worked it out already. This was one of my favourite ranges of guitars that came out start of this year, I think. Maybe end of last year, I don't remember now. I remember talking to Joe Nags at NAMM about them. This is the Nags Kenai J series. So I think what he wanted to do was basically make a more stripped back version of his Kenai model, which is the single cut. I'll give you a better shot of it there. And he just made it work. I think it's got a slightly larger body. They all come with either one P90 in the bridge, two P90s, as is the case with this guitar, or you can get it with two humbuckers. And we've got at least one of each of those. They're such great instruments. I've done many videos with the single pickup version of this guitar, comparing it to a Gibson Junior, What else? Used it for a few different things. Haven't used this one as much. The sort of Les Paul Special, if you like, with the two P90 pickups. They're just brilliant, brilliant guitars, and yeah, there's always something to be said, I think, for a P90 loaded guitar. This fits the bill very nicely. So if you're in the market for that kind of thing, maybe you hadn't considered these before, but do check out the website for the full range of what we've got of these, because I just think as a utility guitar, like as something to actually go out and play with or chord with, as wonderful and as magical as Gibsons are, sometimes you want something that's a little bit more versatile, that doesn't have that signature Gibson snarl all the time. Something like this can do that, but it can also do a tad more. You know, for example, the clean tones I think are a little nicer on this guitar. Really nice, and yes, the phaser did get turned back on there. Alright, let's crack on with some more. Again, I apologise for the pronunciation, but Danielle Fabriziani. Hi Jack, could you play the new Dale Wilson? Yeah, so 3 new Dale Wilson Strats turned up, and almost as quickly as that, I think 1, if not 2 of them have sold already. So we have filmed the listings. However, depending on if they sell, they may or may not end up on YouTube, though hopefully they will. What more do I need to say? You know, Dale Wilson Strats and Tellys, though unfortunately we don't get to see as many of those. The Strat, they're of a standard that nothing else reaches, that we stock anyway. You know, outside of going into the vintage world, they're as close as you get. They're not in this room, unfortunately. Like I say, at least 1, possibly 2 have already sold. So, but hopefully you'll get to see the listings. I hope that they'll still go up anyway, even if the guitars have gone, because they do sound good. Sounded really good. Played them this morning, really nice, and I'm looking forward to the next batch to turn up, which will inevitably sell very quickly as well. All right, Madman. Excellent name. No context required. Hey Jack, is the Marshall SV20H worth it? I really need a Plexi and I can't get the expensive ones. Funnily enough, a lot of people have asked about that amp and these live Q&As. And I've always said the same thing. I think they are excellent amps. It's probably... I have to be careful here because I really like the Studio Classic as well, which is the Baby JCM 800. But the Studio Vintage, the Baby Plexi, we used it on a Jimmy Page video a while ago. I think I even used it on a Prs Silver Sky listing video. Maybe a couple of other listing videos. It sounds great. It absolutely does the Plexi thing without tearing your face off of your skull like a 100-watt Plexi would do. Clean headroom isn't its strong suit, but chances are if you're buying a Plexi, probably that's not your primary concern. And if it is, go for a 50 or 100-watt. But if you just want to crank that thing up and get those mid-gain to high-gain tones, it nails it, you know? Obviously, if you were to stack it up next to a real one or a boutique alternative, you might find that maybe those were a little quieter and have a little bit more range of EQ and tonality and stuff, but if that's the sound you're going for, you don't need any of that. It's going to be noisy, and it's going to be raucous, and it's going to sound like a Marshall. You don't need to EQ it to sound like anything else. So I fully endorse the Studio Vintage 20. I think it's a great little amp. If clean headroom is what you're after, it's not the best choice for that, but if you're after the pure classic driven Plexi sounds, you will not be disappointed at all. So hopefully that helps you. James G. Robertson says, Phase is also great for funk and reggae as well as all the Van Halen stuff. Exactly. Exactly my point, and so much more. Recently we did an Alex Lifeson Tale of Two Tones, and I actually said in that video that I think Lifeson's early phaser tones, like on 2112, Anthem, those early Rush albums, the first 3 or 4 Rush albums, he was using a Maestro phase shifter. I think that's my favourite phase tone ever. It might even be my favourite modulation tone ever. See if I can cop it with this Phase 99. It's kind of a mid-speed. It's a little more watery. I used the buzzword. It's a little more watery than this, but not quite, but it's still a great sound. But yeah, the Alex Lifeson phase tone is amazing. So there's loads of great users of phase shifters, but yeah, you're right. Reggae, funk, it's always been my go-to, like on function gigs and whatever. A clean telly, a compressor and a phaser for any funk stuff. It always works, and it just puts your guitar in the mix in a nice place. You know, particularly if you're, if there's a vocalist and you want to just stay out of the way a little bit, phaser helps you. I don't know, it's some kind of mystical science. You still remain present in the mix, but you don't get in the way of anything else. Anyway, I'm not going to get into phasers again, but yeah, good point. Krenar Silku points out, I also think the modulation effects, for example, tremolo, add a lot of dimension, especially for rhythm guitar playing. Once again, yeah, I agree. I'm coming to discover the virtues of tremolo. I was always sort of against it for a long time. Not against it, I just didn't really get it, but yeah, tremolo is a great effect, and just anything, as long as it's not overdone. I think the reason a lot of people shy away from modulation is, you know, for whatever reason, when you plug into a practice amp nowadays and you call up a factory preset, there's nothing tasteful about what those companies do from the factory. For some reason, they're always capable of it. If you plug into a, I don't know, a Line 6 Spider, it's capable of sounding great, that amp, but the factory preset's just always a little lackluster because there's just too much of everything. You've got way too much chorus, way too much reverb, whatever it is. But that's not to discredit the effect, that's to discredit the way that it's used. So, you know, just bear that in mind. Modulation, maybe you've always thought you hated it because you've heard particularly offensive examples of it, but in actual fact, with a bit of restraint, you can make any modulation effect sound great, particularly on the lower side of the, just turn the mix back a little bit, just turn it down a little bit. Same with distortion pedals, just turn it down a bit and it's going to sound great. Okay, I see there was a thread talking about that Marshall amp, and you say, Madman, you say my dream Plexi we're talking about is the Sir SL67. Right on, my man. That is an astonishing amplifier. Yeah, the Sir SL67 is the 50 watt, the SL68 is the 100 watt. They are superb. So, you know, that Marshall will tick the boxes for you for now, I'm sure, but as and when you're in a position to do it, that's the winner right there. Amazing amp. Okay, let's see what else we got. Odge UK, thoughts on the Washburn N4? Haven't played one of those for quite a long time. The Nuno Bettencourt model. I have played a couple of those. Nuno Bettencourt is an amazing guitarist. I'm a big fan. I love his percussive rhythmic style, and obviously he's a virtuoso lead player as well. I don't know why I'm doing that to signify virtuoso lead playing, but that's what he's capable of doing. his guitar, I don't know, there's a lot I like about it. I like that it's really stripped back and simple. I like that there's no finish on the body, so the wood can breathe. I like the reverse headstock that it has. I like the Floyd Rose. I like the pickups, actually. I think the Bill Lawrence pickups, I think it's still got that anyway. They sound great. It's never quite did it for me, though. I'm more of a sort of Charvel and Jackson kind of a fan, you know, of those high performance type guitars. Or even actually, the Washburn N4 is fairly similar in certain respects to the Mayonnaise guitars that we stock here, because it's got the same attack and the same sort of high fidelity tone. I just think that Mayonnaise, as an example, do things a little bit more to my taste and in a little bit more of a versatile way. But that's not to take away from that guitar. It is a great guitar, but I haven't played one for a long time, and my memory of it compares perhaps in a slightly inferior way to a Mayonnaise. That's all I can really say about that, but love the man behind it, love Nuno Bettencourt's playing. The Handsome Goon says, how do you feel about the new Tone Master amps from Fender? They're really good, they're really practical, and actually I haven't done it side by side with a real Deluxe, for example, but just in the context of listening to it by itself, it's pretty convincing. You can tell that it's not a valve amp, obviously. You can just tell, but it's a lot more practical than a valve amp, with that attenuator built in and the speaker simulation and stuff like that. I do really like them. I mean, if it were my choice, would I choose that over a smaller, less expensive valve amp? Depends on the context. But if you've always wanted a Deluxe reverb tone, and you don't want to spend that much money, and you don't want an amp that weighs as much as that, then that is the best substitute for a valve-driven Deluxe reverb. So it just depends on what you're after. But yeah, I think they're really nice. They're really nice. All right, the Lula 26. Hi Jack. If choosing between an R8 Les Paul and an R9, which one would you go for and why? Now that's a very direct question that I can answer very directly, because I did have that exact choice years ago, and I purchased an R8, which is a 58 Les Paul reissue. When I purchased that guitar, it wasn't as it is now. You didn't see the same level of amazing flame tops that you do now on the 60th anniversary guitars. I have also come to appreciate the slightly slimmer neck on a 59, and even more so on a 60. But if I was starting again, I'd probably still go for the 58. It's just my thing. It's just my thing. The big neck and the plainer top. I've always liked a slightly plainer finish on a guitar. Not to say plain in the derogatory sense of the word, just not as flamey. So I do always like that, but I have started to turn with some of the recent 59s and 60s that we've had. So they do play different, they do sound different. We did shoot a video comparing the three on the channel a little while ago, so check that out if you're interested in the tonal differences. Yeah, to answer your question directly, I have an R8, so I'm going to give it to that, because I love them. Love it! Right. Sorry, you asked a follow-up question. Would you rather buy one of the new Epiphone LP Standard 50s and upgrade the pickups? The Epiphones are great guitars, but I have to say, it doesn't matter what pickup you put in those things, it's not going to be in the same league. They are nice guitars, but the custom shops, there's so much more than just the pickups, unfortunately. It's the neck, it's the quality of the woods they use, it's the quality of the construction, it's the feel of the neck as well, that sort of hand-finished, asymmetrical wizardry that the custom shop guitars have that Epiphones just don't. You know, maybe you'll be perfectly happy with an Epiphone with good pickups in. I'm sure it will sound great, but it's not going to be in the same league, unfortunately. Okay, let me just see how many questions we got here, because I'm trying my best to get through as many of these as possible, but there are a lot, so forgive me if I don't get through every one of these questions today. I'm trying my best. James Bledge says, what do you find the biggest differences between the PRS CE and the likes of a custom? So a CE, generally speaking, is a bolt-on neck with a maple neck as well. So inherently it's brighter, it's snappier, it has more attack, it has more, I think, of a slight Fender character to it than a custom, which is usually a mahogany body and a mahogany neck, typically. They're both really, really good. Obviously the custom is more of the traditional PRS voice, but if you're coming from a Fender school of thought and you want your first PRS or whatever that feels more similar, then the CE is going to perform in terms of the way it feels because of the maple neck and because of the way it sounds. So I like them both, but tonally, you know, the CE is brighter, it's snappier, it's not quite as powerful and punchy in the mids. Okay, Tons Ski Legit. Again, I promise, I apologise for the pronunciations here, but have you ever played Rock and Roll Relics? If so, what's your thoughts? I'm afraid I have not. I think I've got a vague picture in the back of my mind of what those guitars are, but I haven't played one, so I'm sorry, I can't give an opinion on that. Hanson Goon says, I really enjoy the feel of playing on my Strat, but hate the volume knob's position. I'm looking at a Charvel, but wondered if the volume knob will be an issue. Do you have any advice on that? Not really. It depends on which Charvel you're talking about. I mean, the ones that we stock here, the sort of the Pro mods and stuff like that, it's fairly similar to a standard Strat layout. If it really bothered you, I guess maybe you could swap the volume and tone controls around. Or with a Charvel, you know, typically people are playing, not to stereotype here, but typically people are playing with slightly higher gain. The tone control is maybe not as important, so maybe you could disconnect the tone and, you know, remove that control entirely, bump the volume down. But, you know, if it's a real practical physical problem, then Charvel is going to be quite similar, so you're probably not going to get away from it there, unfortunately. I think, just looking at a couple of comments below, actually, people have recommended pretty much exactly that. Right, Jamie Neese says, hey Jack, Lefty from Los Angeles, welcome to you. Curious, who's the guitarist that does your left-handed demos? That was a chap called Mike Ross, who came in quite a while ago now, did a handful of left-handed demos, did some cool stuff. So yeah, check him out. I think he's got his own music out and stuff like that. Mike Ross. You can find him on all the usual internet forum places. Topher T says, love your Tale of Two Tones videos. Your playing is out of this world. That's very kind of you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoy those videos. They are fun to do, and there's a few more in the pipeline that you're going to be seeing soon, including one I believe is going out tomorrow, which was a particularly fun one, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, thank you very much, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Robin says, hey Jack, how do you feel about G&L guitars? Again, it's been a long time since I played one of those. You know, I don't want to say anything bad about them, but there was nothing particularly memorable about them to me either. But then that could be unfair because I haven't played one for a long time, but the ones I played at least all just a bit weird. They had weird pickup configurations and weird necks and weird tremolo systems and stuff like that. And it seemed like they were just being weird for the sake of it, but I could be wrong. I don't know enough about their product range. There could be more viable Fender alternatives that actually provide a more high quality experience. I just don't know. The ones I played didn't do it for me, but yeah, I'm afraid I could be wrong on that, so forgive me. I just dropped out a sec. Hopefully we're back. My phone had a battery issue there. Right. I'm going to zip through a few more questions and then I'm going to wrap up with something else. So, right. Custom shop. Andrew Bates says, custom shop. Is it a marketing exercise to sell more expensive guitars? You're probably going to expect this answer from me, but definitely not. The custom shop level instruments, even the team built guitars from Fender, for example, they're a different beast because they're looking backwards, whereas USA guitars, more production level guitars, are all about looking forwards and generally kind of conveying a level of consistency. Custom shop guitars are just all totally different. They're more unique, at least in my experience. So there's a joy in finding that one unique guitar that will have something totally that appeals to you. Obviously that applies to production level guitars as well, but just with custom shop it's kind of like 1,000 times more that unique quality. So I have to say, just to chime in quickly on that, it's not a marketing exercise because you can see the amount of extra work that goes into building those guitars as well. So many factory tour videos online and stuff. There's a lot more work goes into it. They're just, in my opinion, often slightly higher grade of craftsmanship that goes into it as well. So, everyone's got a different opinion on that, but yeah, I can't say it's a marketing exercise at all. Okay, I'm going to jump on this one quickly. Stanislav Nigra, again, horrible pronunciation, I do apologise. Hello, do you think there is considerable difference or an upgrade in blues breaker pedals from exotic BB preamp to, say, the JHS Morning Glory, Wampler Pantheon or King of Tone? Unfortunately, those 4 pedals all sound totally different. But the BB preamp is not a downgrade from any of those that you talked about, but it is a very different sounding pedal. To me, if you're after a true blues breaker pedal, the JHS is probably the best representative of that because it's more open in the mids and it's clearer and it's more dynamic. However, you also mentioned a King of Tone in there, which, it is one of the very best overdrive pedals in the world. I've never heard a clone or something that claims to be a clone that sounds anything like it. Not to say it's better or worse, but it doesn't sound like it. So, yeah, they're all very different pedals, unfortunately, but there's certainly a BB preamp is on the same level as all of those that you just talked about in terms of quality. Matt, 23 pound. Does the Nags have a chunky neck profile? No, actually, it's quite slim. I'd say it's kind of like a 59 Les Paul, which to a lot of people isn't slim, maybe, but some guitars of this nature have really chunky, like the Gibson Juniors have really chunky necks. This doesn't have that. Really comfortable all the way up, and it feels pretty even as you go up as well. And it's a really nice sort of semi-gloss finish, so it just feels super speedy. I don't know what that was, but as you move all the way from the bottom up to the top, it's really comfortable. The Lula 26. Which Dr. Z amp would you recommend for a blues player? Wide ranging from the Three Kings to Cream and Peter Green. Tough question, but just given the sheer spread of different amp tones that those players you've referenced had, you've gone everywhere from sort of blackface Fender amps through to Marshalls. So I'm going to give it to the Maz for that because that is the one amp that does a little bit of everything. If you're a blues player, you probably like reverb, so Maz with reverb. The 18 is plenty of amp for anyone's money. And it will legitimately do some of those cleaner, more mid-scoops Fender tones, as well as being able to push it and get some of those driven cream tones. You've only got to look at the sheer number of our videos where I've used a Maz for so many different sounds and styles to kind of get the point of how beautifully versatile that amp is. So yeah, I'd recommend the Maz 18 with reverb. Alright, I've got something to show you. Bear with, because this is a cool one. did say I might play that thin line telly. Might not get to that now, unfortunately, but hopefully when you see what this is, it's going to be worth it. Hey. Crank the amp. Yes, indeed, friends. This is the Prs Silver Sky Nebula. Finally got to play one today. These, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a very limited version of the John Mayer Silver Sky model, one of 500. And we were quite lucky to get a significant number of these guitars. 500 for the world, and you know, I don't know exactly how many we've had, but it was quite a sizable chunk of that. Including this one, and this isn't currently for sale. This is, as I believe, part of John's collection at the moment. But he graciously said, you know, it's cool gear, so I thought it would be pretty cool to show you in this video. And I'm not going to do it justice through an iPhone camera, but it's a pretty cool finish that this thing has. And, you know, other than the finish, it's no different to a regular Silver Sky Rosewood. So it plays and sounds as good as one of those, but it is, you know, it is a pretty cool thing, and not going to see many of these at all. So I'm glad I got to chuck it into today's live video for you, particularly with the 2-rock. Go on then. still don't believe the Silver Sky is a great instrument, after all this time, I'm afraid to say that, you know, probably a lost case on this one. But in case you haven't seen it, we recently put out a video all about the Silver Sky and the maple version versus the rosewood. So check that out if you haven't seen it, and if you're still unconvinced on how great these guitars are. Yeah, that's all I can say. But yeah, I'm really glad I got to show you this. It's a pretty good piece of cool gear, and that's what this video is about, as well as the live Q&A. I think that's it for today. I've tried my best to get through as many of your questions as I can, so forgive me if I've missed your question, but hopefully next week, next Wednesday, when we do another one of these live Q&As, I'll get to it. So anyway, thanks very much for watching, everybody. I'm sorry I didn't get to play the thin line telly this week either. Maybe next week that'll make an appearance, who knows. But anyway, you're going to have a few cool videos from us coming out over the course of the next week. So have yourselves a good week and weekend. Take care. I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Bye-bye. Cheers, guys.